on now. Also, during this time frame, I completed dozens of remote LJMU Doctoral Academy sponsored PhD trainings. Several during year 1 were required, and all during years 2 and 3 were self-selected and in fulfillment of LJMU training plan requirements. Side note, do not skip. For each listed remote and in-person training, I created a blog post with brief discussion of the event, including the in-person and remote residencies. I did the same for dozens of monthly studio summaries, monthly supervisory meeting notes, LJMU milestone achievements that is created and posted individual web blog discussions. You can see any or all of them at ginadominique.com. TT Creative Research blog. Qualitative research methods, including creative or artistic methods, analytical methods, along with the philosophical basis for the project, are included in the overall research design. See research design graphic here. Many versions of this, probably dozens, were executed throughout last year. I pared it way down and landed on this one in January. First thing I discussed then is my philosophical position. The philosophical assumptions underlying AutoAbstraction, you know the long title already, rest on Western philosophy of art, phenomenology, and feminist aesthetics. From these contiguous philosophical perspectives, I maintain that the literal physicality of painting is inextricably linked to human physicality, including correlations between how each is constructed. For example, an analogy between the painting's stretchers and the body's skeleton can be made. Similarly, an analogy between the canvas or linen and the body's musculature might also be drawn, in that while canvas or linen is stretched over and around a wood or metal frame, our muscle fibers are stretched over and around our skeletal structure. And analogous to the canvas's primer is the human body's myofascial or connective tissue. And finally, on top of the primer with paint, the imagery is composed or exists, which might be likened to the body's skin pigmentation, the eyes and hair colorations, etc. Paint, like our skin, is all that is outwardly visible to the world. Both paint that covers the substrate and skin that covers the skeleton and musculature act like a mirror or reflection of the artist-painter's mind and the viewer's psychic functioning. Regarding this, consider sociologist Sweta Rankin. Othering is another common thread in post-colonial thinking about race and old age. It can be witnessed, in the post-colonial writings around the barbaric other. That's Baha, 2004. The Orient said, 1978, and the subaltern Spivak, 1999, and de Beauvoir's 1972 reference to the other within in relation to old age. The concept of the other is fundamental to and predicated on essentialism and binarism. Drawing on Gramsci's, that is 1971, analysis, power could be seen as hegemony, or the situated prominence of dominant groups who establish their dominance by manufacturing spontaneous consent of dominated classes through a process of coercive and consensual control. Dominant discourse then imbues the human subjects with characteristics of purity, aligned with Aryan races, masculinity, and everlasting youth. The other is constructed through the dominant gaze, and its diametric opposite, the impure, non-white, female, old, and decrepit body. That is distal in all its manifestations from pure being. That's Rajan Rankin in her writing, Race, Embodiment, and Later Life, Reanimating Aging Bodies of Color, 2018. the exploration of beauty in some ways, flipping it over into an instrument of feminist resistance, or showing directly how women's beauty could be experienced outside of patriarchy, has been a theme of much art by women of the 20th and 21st centuries. Georgia O'Keeffe's Flowers and Judy Chicago's Dinner Party were place settings undertaken to absorb and reverse the objectifying gaze. The exploration of the meaning of the female body in the work of performance artists such as Hannah Wilkie, Karen Finley, and Orlan tries both to explore the objectification of the female body and to affirm women's experiences in its concrete realities from inside, to make of it empathically a subject rather than an object. See Striff, 1977. This quote is from Sardwell, 2022. Beauty seems in need of rehabilitation today as an impulse that can be as liberating as it has been deemed enslaving, wrote philosopher Peg Ziegler-Brand. I quote her quite a bit throughout my whole dissertation, 2000. Young female artists toy with feminine stereotypes in ways that make their feminist elders uncomfortable. And if you aren't familiar with feminism and art history, they're inextricably linked throughout the second half of the 20th century in particular. And Judy Chicago, still living well into her 80s, is receiving worldwide acclaim now, but in the feminist art world has been just a giant for decades, since the Dinner Party. Side note, trying to remember the Sacred Spaces thing. You can't assume that you know her, right? You? Just curious.
No.
Yes.
A lot of nods and compliments. Okay. Indeed, vernacular norms of beauty as expressed in media and advertising have shifted in virtue of the feminist and anti-racist attacks on dominant body norms as the concept's long journey continues. And then when I spoke about abstract painter Susan Freecon, when I spoke with abstract painter Susan Freecon during one of the artist interviews I conducted during the fall of 2022, she spoke on her own philosophy of art, saying, we somehow, by some fluke, we have a bigger brain. For some genetic reason, we have figuring capacity, and so we have to solve this problem and live more sustainably in our environment. It gives us so much joy to see the apple scenes, which is talking about. Humans need to do our part. If we want to continue to look at a sunset and we want to still watch birds and we appreciate nature, but a lot of human stuff is a constant struggle. From my point of view, back and forth in kind of good versus evil forces, and I think you know this, for me, in our art, being alive and being creative, I do like making it, plus the product itself, both making that and the experience of being a creative. It's, well, I wouldn't know how to define it. It's a choice we make. I live in the world and I consider philosophy a field of knowledge, and you know, it's stunning. So the second philosophy that I consider is phenomenology. The philosophical basis then for my color research is built on phenomenology, which was constructed by German philosopher Edmund Husserl, advanced by French philosopher Maurice Merleau-Ponty, then contemporized by American-based philosopher of perception Masvita Chiramuta. Colors are not properties of minds or visual experiences, objects or lights, but of perceptual processes, interactions that involve all three terms. According to this theory, which I call, I'm again citing her, color adverbialism. Colors are not properties of things as they first appear. Instead, colors are ways that stimuli appear to certain kinds of individuals, and at the same time, ways that individuals perceive certain kinds of stimuli. The adverbialism comes in because colors are said to be properties of processes rather than things. So instead of treating color words as adjectives which describe things, we should treat them as adverbs which describe activities. I eat hurriedly. I walk gracelessly, and on a fine day I see the sky bluely. That's from Chimurta's Perceptual Pragmatisms and the Naturalized Ontology of Color. When I interviewed Anne Sophie Lorange, in response to my question regarding the relationship between color theory and her painting, in keeping with Chimurta's philosophy, which I don't even know if you're aware of, she's a fairly new philosopher, she replied, you can read about color and about color theory, but you wouldn't understand color without being in color and without painting in color. By the way, this is Anne Sophie Lorange. This is her work on the long gallery wall.
Yeah.
This is the first time.
So it's two different things in a sense. Knowing things about color and using or understanding color. You have to be in the practice to understand it completely. Small excerpt. By the way, these interviews were between like an hour and a half. I learned a lot doing interviews. They were super rewarding, by the way, because you know how many abstract painters are on the planet, and Anne Sophie and I are together in this program. It's a little crazy. Gift. So then the third philosophy that I rely heavily on, and maybe really is the premise for so much of my academic career, my painting career, my existence probably, is feminist aesthetics. Additionally, and equally important, the philosophical positionality of auto-abstract painting, let me just stop there, also sits upon feminist aesthetics, which branches out from phenomenology, which we were just talking about. Forget that we. Feminist aesthetics, yeah, it's like this little flipping police officer in my head now. Feminist aesthetics philosopher, Carolyn Quinn, the word police is on duty. Feminist aesthetics philosopher, Carolyn Quinn states, Merleau-Ponty situated his phenomenological description as a third position between empiricist and intellectualist understandings of the world and accounts of epistemology. Empiricism, a sort of reductive materialism, begins with physical objects in the world as given and subsequently tries to explicate mental stuff, mind, emotions, perception, in terms of pure empirical categories. In contrast, intellectualism begins with consciousness as given and subsequently attempts to explain the reality of objects and the world in terms of mental stuff by reference to forms of intuition and categories of the understanding. Each assumes, therefore, the separation between the mental and the physical, whilst proceeding to favor one of the divisions. A dualism Merleau-Ponty fundamentally rejects. Instead, he begins with describing an irreducible involvement of individuals and the world, exemplified in his statement that it is the body which perceives. That's Merleau-Ponty, 1945, page 410, by the way. However, rather than using the term subject or body, he describes humans as body subjects and posits that consciousness is incarnate in the world. Same text, page 225. This unity has led to the observation that Merleau-Ponty's philosophy is characterized by ambiguity. That's from Carolyn Quinn, Perception and Painting in Merleau-Ponty's Thought, pages 9 through 12. Post-feminist artists such as Kiki Smith and Jenny Saville build upon the efforts of their predecessors in exploring the body, gender, and sexual identity. Okay, it looks like we're jumping ahead 200 years, right? All right. Post-feminist, I am doing that. We are not. You come along with me. Post-feminist art, often highly theoretical and deeply serious, also tends to be playful and parodic in style, such as the work of Vanessa Beecroft. It tends to be less overtly political than the art of earlier feminists. influenced by postmodern speculations that gender, sexuality, and the body itself are creations of culture that are malleable and performative. Post-feminist art confounds and disrupts notions of stable identity. That's from Rose 1994 and Butler 1990. Such art can be seen as individualistic compared to the social agendas of earlier feminism. Enter Autotheory. That's just a side note. But perhaps for this reason, this sort of art is also more attuned to differences among women. These presentations of the female body tend to draw attention to the position it has in culture, not only the sexed body, but also bodies marked by racial and cultural differences, James 2010. In the 1970s and 80s, Cuban-American artist Ana Mendieta produced a series of works making use of her own body to form silhouettes and shapes. She was a frequent subject of my MFA studies and thesis. That is Mendieta's work. All of this activity is theoretically charged and often philosophically motivated. That's Rickett 2001. At the same time, it should be stressed that the kinds of art that qualify to be labeled feminist are hugely varied and heterogeneous. And as time passes and political climates shift, the interventions of artists and their visionary critiques alter accordingly. 21st century theorizing about feminist art now includes acknowledgement of the many forms of global feminisms and increased frequency of feminist content that deals with war and politics. Robinson and Buzek offer refreshed definitions of feminist art that is not a simple classification of a type of art, but rather indicates the space where feminist politics and the domain of art making intersect. That's citing from Robinson and Buzek 2019. Then I move on in the next section to my theoretical methodology, which is auto theory. Are you with me on all of this? Is anyone objecting? Are you recognizing this language? Some?
Do you want to just give us a quick description of what's different between auto theory and, say, autoethnography, or something you know?
Say it again. What's the difference between auto theory and
Autoethnography, just to contextualize.
Yes. Well, I mean, I hope that what I'm going to read, like I've been trying to define as we go, so even if you aren't familiar, then you get the gist.
Right.
So I'm going to do that now. But also just let me say that because this came up at dinner last night in a discussion between, a few of us in my cohort. So my understanding of auto theory, it's the overarching or umbrella methodology, and under it, or maybe we can think of those of like the spine of the umbrella, right? Autoethnicity. What was the one? Autobiography.
Autoethnography.
Autoethnography.
Automethodology.
Yes. No, well, automethodology refers to auto theory. It's like a short, synonym for it. But these other methods of automatic writing or auto writing, auto theorizing are, one of the whole, part of the whole. Okay.
Thank you.
Auto theory, and this might further illuminate, I hope. Auto theory stems from postmodernism and art methodological approaches of analysis, including feminism, Marxism. This is me, again, attempting to create this umbrella. Marxism, structuralism, post-structuralism, deconstruction, and psychoanalysis. An auto-theoretical position is, by definition, a feminist approach that I was initially introduced through original readings and that were assigned in a theory and aesthetics course I took with Libby Lumpkin during the first semester of my MFA studies at the University of New Mexico. Postmodern art methods were later codified by for me by art historian Lori Schneider Adams' survey art history text, which I taught from for about 15 years, the first 15 years of my career. I just finished something like number 24 or 5. In her art method and in her art methodologies texts, all of which again I taught from. I taught art theory and art history along with drawing and painting the first 15 years of my career, because academics in this century have to be 3 people. You have to be to maintain your position. These include, or to get one to begin with, and then to maintain it. These include, sorry, lost my place. This is relevant because some of these very methods, particularly feminism, Marxism, and autobiography, autoethnicity, combined with art history as a method of analysis, make up what we now call auto theory. So it's like postmodernism. We don't say, Jake and I were talking about this in relationship to another term, but it's applicable here too. We don't say postmodernism, right? That's awkward and odd. So now, because we are in this postmodern era, we are not yet codified as to what we are going to call postmodernism. But auto theory is a contender, or an auto-theoretical period. In fact, it has such momentum in the last decade, or maybe 2 or 3 decades, that some refer to it as not a methodological approach, but as a philosophical approach. Just saying. Say this.
So, like, as part of this, like, timeline, then, could you, like, drawing queer theory, feminist theory, and new criticism, and, like, you know, making it...
Yeah, so here's really where I'm at.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
The new thing...
Yeah, I could recreate her chart and then have my own, but it would be 99% hers, and that's not.
Ginaism.
Yeah.
Ginaism, yeah.
I'm not at the forefront of this. I'm keen on it, but I'm happy that it's around. Because I rely on it as my main methodology to analyze images for my painting praxis chapters. Go ahead. Did you have a question? Okay. Just like Brady did, you just put your hand up if you do, or you want to say something, then just like Allie did. So in the discussion and analysis chapter, I've employed auto theory to discuss 18 praxis paintings which were shown during the fall of 2023 Stevenson University solo exhibition. This postmodern theoretical framework collectively is what Western academia credits with and what it regards as its more inclusivist academic position. Okay, and then much fight and debate about that. That's just a side note. And like so many, maybe most 21st century art academics, I've built my 25-year-long academic classroom practices and techniques, whether it's studio art history or contemporary theory course, using these art methodological techniques. And by the way, so art history is a big component in auto theory. Art history, feminism together, even in literary criticism, right? So not just specific to visual art criticism, but across the arts, I should say. Still, throughout the course of my PhD research, I've updated and revised my references, which naturally updates my thinking from my current position or as I view it now. These same art methodologies were the same postmodern theoretical basis from which I and so much of Western academia, I would have said we in the past, operates from, are for me modified to include an umbrella of auto theory. And as I understand it, an auto-theoretical platform does not exist or replace any one of these vital, still relevant postmodern theories, but instead frames them within a bodily, personally lived, feminist, and art historical theoretical context. Okay, so did that answer? Just curious, Brady.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, of course.
Sandy is
Sorry.
We look similar.
Oh, sorry. I'm calling you Brady and you're Sandy.
Yeah.
Great. I did it last year too, but I might have called him you.
What's the
Forgive me. Say it again.
What's the difference between
Brandon
digital
is
art history and art history?
Well, the
Because you
just
have
the
this-
format, really, but the format is kind of everything.
Okay, so you've been reading it. I don't get it.
Well, art historians, for example, that are like graduate students, I'm thinking like just my everyday life, they come from the Graduate Center at CUNY and they teach, a course for us during their graduate career. They're digital art historians. I was, even though I operate and function, I am not, how do you say, I'm an immigrant to digital.
Yeah.
Like a lot of us are, but some of you are indigenous, native digital speakers. So then this creates different paradigms. It's just the way of technology now. As described by Rhea McNamara in her The Deep Feminist Dive into Auto Theory, Hyperallergic Review of Lauren Fournier's Auto Theory as Feminist Practice in Art, Writing, and Criticism may be best summed up in this way. Conversations about how to decolonize academia often pretzel into well-intentioned hand-wringing and diversifying faculty hires or navigating its publisher-Paris tenure track and theory widely understood within academia as a well-substantiated but also systematic explanation of facts and observations often perpetuates its vertical pipelines of colonial thinking. This approach, which values above all else logic, hegemony, and the still frequent citation of words written by white men, isn't necessarily for everyone. Auto theory, then, has been regarded as a way of dismantling these binaries and is more horizontal. It centers and legitimizes individual bodily experiences as a means of processing knowledge production, basically a way of thinking through high cultural theory via our physical embodied selves, popularized in Paul B. Prasadio's Testo Junkie 2013 and Maggie Nelson's The Argonauts 2015. Auto theory gained traction in the 2010s when writing about one's own experiences uses testosterone and becoming a mother enabled a queer and feminist engagement with theory. Its emergence coincided with the decade zeitgeist of identity politics and hashtag hyper-authenticity and auto theory as feminine practice in art, writing, and criticism. Lauren Fournier's position, auto theory, and interdisciplinary approach to history weighing in on the politics of access surrounding knowledge production and what it means, in the bell hooks sense, to bring everyday life to theory. That's McNamara, Deep Feminist Dive into Auto Theory 2021. During an interview for Columbia Journal for Literary Criticism, editor Berggren asked Lauren Fournier about her thoughts on already established tropes within auto theory, combining self-writing with a more communal citation practice, and about what she finds desirable about the tension between those two things. Lauren Fournier, then, like reigning contemporary queen of auto theory, she said, auto theory is most simply the combination of autobiography and memoir with theory and philosophy as practices of theorizing, of philosophizing. That self-other form recurs in autotheoretical writing, the form of a memoir or personal essay alongside footnotes, endnotes, marginalia research. It follows in an academic tradition with bibliographies and citations while expanding beyond it and transforming it. You can add lots of pictures. It opens up not only what memoiristic work can be, but also what academic work can be. I believe there's something productive politically, aesthetically, even ethically in bringing self-writing and citations together. What happens when they are placed side by side? Is there an attempt to ground one's writing in oneself while also looking outside of or beyond that self? It is understanding the It is understanding that consequentiality and stakes of the personal, but also the limits of that personal self. The self is always already relational, always already in excess of that self as soon as we produce something right outside of ourselves. Notably, it's been writers of color, queer, trans writers, and women writers who have come up against charges of solipsism and narcissism. Western colonial art and academic spaces, go figure. These are writers who have been historically overdetermined by limiting conceptions of the personal, as if their work is inherently subjective and embodied or marked, while the work of white cis, nothing against white cis men, BTW, married to one, white cis brothers, at least white enough, whitish. Cis men is neutral, which of course we know is not the case. It becomes all the more complicated then when these writers engage directly or explicitly with themselves in their work. Citations serve a range of functions in autotheoretical work. It can be a way for writers to legitimate their life writing or to provide evidence of whatever that writer is theorizing from their life, and to show that this idea is not only coming from them. These are the early days of a new wave of the genre, and like any genre, there will be certain codes and conventions that take shape. That's Bergman 2022. Is it going? No. Stop. There we go. Maybe naturally I conclude this section with a restatement of the theoretical framework I've used to create the practice-led project, which is an overarching auto-theoretical one. I was affirmed in this during at least a couple of the 5 artist interviews I conducted, including the one with the New York, bless you, painter Alyssa Siglianos Carter. For example, she responded to a question I asked regarding her use of an autobiographical approach to her own paintings, saying, I want people to understand that this is absolutely work made by a black person. By the way, just interestingly, her mother was Italian-American, recently deceased, and her father, also deceased, African-American. But she always identified as Black American, even though she went to mostly cis-white private schools. She's a really interesting person. I think I'm someone who makes a statement. I was talking to someone a couple of months ago, and they're like, sometimes people make work that's for everyone. Mine is very much for black people, and I'm a black person, and I feel like, yeah, I couldn't make this work if I wasn't who I am. Obviously, that's true for everyone, but mine is so linked to my experience as a person of color in the world, and then I'm using hair that is very me, very recognized. People see it, they're like, what am I looking at? So it does take an understanding of what you're looking at. She goes on, and this was one of the longer interviews. Anyway, I end this particular quote with, I was like, oh, I feel enraged and I feel heartbroken, still, Alyssa. And I feel disempowered. And so I was like, what can I do? How can I kind of reclaim that or shift that feeling for myself? And this is what I have. I have like power. And then I move into a discussion of my qualitative research tools and materials and methods. I love lists, and so this chapter is okay with me because I get to repeatedly make lists. I'll read you one of them. Qualitative research methods, tools, and materials used to inspire and fuel thesis data collection during the research period. My studio painting tools and abstract painting methods. Readings, digital and analog ephemera collections of historical color theory charts, historical ethnographic maps, and medical and commercial skin tone charts, a solo exhibition, a visiting artist residency that involved hosting a design class, an advanced curating class in the gallery where my exhibition hung, a public artist gallery talk, and 5 artist interviews, some of which clearly I've been referencing. Another is, or then I specifically focus on, I think, maybe 5 of those. Tools and materials used to create dozens. I don't know if I did 50, 60, 70, maybe more paintings. Using Holbein brand acrylic paints, some of which are there. Golden also in there. I use open brand or open formula golden paints. They're slow drying. They act something like a combo of acrylic, like they're way faster than oil, but they dry with this maybe a little more intoxicatingly beautiful oil-like finish. Boar bristle paintbrushes, gesso, cotton canvas, linen, all stretched on wood or aluminum frames. Cotton and watercolor paper, illustration boards, sketchbooks. Felting wool for one project, iPad and Procreate for one project, and my iPhone camera. The main tools, materials, and techniques used in the practice-based thesis involve an analog painting studio, which I've talked about. This 2-year period during which I produced these 40 finished paintings on canvas or linen, dozens of paint sketches and studies, several color tests, several photographs, a digital painting, a felted wall hanging, photo documentation of works in progress, some solo exhibition installation shots.
Tina, can I ask, how long time do you use on one painting?
Oh, this is a good
Like, for
question.
instance.
For just in this, like in the past, you know, sometimes I've worked on a series of 8 paintings for 14 years, and other times I produce a body of work that might be 20 or more paintings in 3 months. It's so, I can't even articulate what specific it is, but this, because I set that show up, or she booked me when we were in our first year, was at the very end, beginning of our 3rd year. I had a time frame in that show to get ready that dictated. And then I didn't want to keep painting because then I wouldn't be doing this, because I do, if I'm being fair, prefer that.
I can tell by the paintings that the top layers are quick gestural marks.
Yeah, all 3 or 4 layers are that.
Yeah.
But weirdly, and these took, because I'm working on 20 or 30 or 40 at the same time, they're not happening even though, you know, a layer might happen over the course of a weekend or a week or 2. You have to process that. That takes time. Anyway, so 2 years, I really did work on most of them for 2 years. Even though they're in a half done or mostly done state for 1 or 1.5 years. But then one of the biggest paintings that I produced, I took 7 months. And it's the simplest solution. No, it's the long horizontal one. 7 flipping months to do that piece. I mean, I feel so successful because it does look like a quick, easy thing. I just know how I wrestled with that painting. And then that massive one that you would have thought, I would have guessed, you know, I'm going to need at least 3 months on that. I took 3.
It's like twice your
3
size,
days.
right?
It's more than twice my size. It's at least 12 feet high, maybe 15. I think it's 12 or 13 or 14. The other one, the big one, is 15 long.
This is just an interesting remark. When I'm looking at them, I like sort of feel they have this, like the top layer with the gestural marks. It's like almost like a language that I'm trying to decode.
Yeah.
It's very interesting how it's like there's some sort of.
So many people have said my whole life, like from my teens.
Yeah.
You know, I started painting quite seriously as an undergraduate, maybe around 18, like, oh my God, this is who I am and what I'm going to do for my life. And from that time, people comment that it's very graffiti-like and, like linguistically based, and I am enamored of structuralism, linguistics, post-structuralism, deconstruction, language. I have a writer brother. Yeah, I own that. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm so curious, like how your process evolved, because you were just explaining.
I'm sorry, I just didn't hear how what was.
Oh, I was curious for like the summary of the evolution of your process. have a space and you
Yeah.
set up on,
Oh yeah, you saw them set up post facto. So really what I do is if I have one massive piece, it dominates the floor of my studio right now, which is much smaller post-pandemic, because that was my summer studio. Oh, and like Susan, who I interviewed, Susan Freecon, I used to have a studio with her at the Elizabeth Foundation, so I had a much bigger space. So depending on the space, then that, you know, limits or dictates something of how I'm working. But generally speaking, I paint on the floor. I'm not an easel painter. That's, for some people, maybe are. This has never been me. I started painting at 2.5 on the floor though. That heavily influences. Yeah, Mom set me up with finger paints, like circa 2.5. Probably I found myself then, and I only realized it at like 18 or something.
yeah, I was curious, because you have them up, like,
I put them up so I could see them, because when they're on the floor, like I'm in them, and I don't see them really, honestly. Is that a question or?
Oh, it was almost a question. I got the question.
Go.
I'm just curious. Well,
Oh, sorry.
how to-
Part 2.
because I love pulling out off the stuff and you had
Yeah.
shown them, and I was wondering.
Did I already have that slide? Sorry. Okay.
Let her finish asking the question.
Okay. I was going to go back to it.
Yeah, so I was just curious about how you set up your space and,
Oh,
like,
this is the exhibition. But what's the connection to that?
oh no, this one.
Okay.
Because I know that she used to like have limited space, so she would unroll like her large pieces of paper and fabric and,
Yeah.
and then like drop it. Yeah, I was curious, like when you first started, you said you were drawing on the floor with crayons and then.
Oh, finger painting on the floor. And really, I'm a painter before. I learned to draw. I do it happily and naturally, but I'm first and foremost a painter. With lots of other, you know, materials too. But, so the question is, for my larger pieces that are mural size, yes, I roll out a linen, usually gessoed linen for those massive pieces. They're gessoed linens. And then I don't stretch my own work. Anne Sophie often does. But just time-wise and skill and space and all of that, I have them stretched. I cut these last ones and stretch them. It was horrified to see me cut them, but the canvas stretcher. So was that everything? And then
Well, I was just going to ask about the qualitative research part. How did you decide, you know, that 5 was the number, and what was your method or your process for selecting your participants?
Did I decide 5?
I don't know.
I talked about 5? Yeah.
You did 5 interviews.
Oh, okay. Oh, 5 interviews?
Yeah, sorry, the interviews
Oh my God.
because
That's what he recommended. But here's what, I learned so much in that process. I invited maybe you know, like a ridiculous number, because people said, oh, you have to invite like 100 people to get 5. I was like, so I invited, I don't know, 20 or 30 people. I mean, I don't know 100. Even on Instagram, you know, abstract painters, are there 100 in the world? Anyway, I came up with like 30 names. And like 15 or more people said yes. So I just cut it off at 9, and then I had my husband interview me. And then when I went to, I'll get into that later. The interviews were spectacularly fulfilling and beautiful. And I did 9 of them. But then, you know, you have to like edit that information. And I asked 4 questions. I asked, I didn't have a time limit because I wanted people to have a conversation with me. And I said, someone on for 90 minutes, you know, I should have 1 or 2 questions and 15, 20 minute limit. Because again, you have to like months translating information.
So the questions were consistent across all
Yes.
the interviews?
Yeah, I'm gonna read them to you.
Okay, great.
Feminist aesthetics, should I talk about this for a minute? Or did I already? Did I read this slide?
Yeah.
Over past this? Oh, Way past it. Sorry,
Right.
sorry. Tell me where we are.
One more.
Okay. So I felt validated in the connection between my theoretical approach and my studio praxis tools and materials choices when, during my interview of Mexican-American painter, collage artist Xochitl Solis, stated the following about her materials usage. When I sit down and think about the materials and like what I'm trying to express, either with color, like that sensation, or by being informed by these experiences with community, with other people who are also trying to be curious and figure out their place, especially in a state, which is from Austin, Texas, that maybe is not so open to diversity of thought and or always has accessibility of resources for, inequity and things like that. It helps me feel more grounded in my practice. For my self-worth, I think it's important to keep making work and keep presenting myself as being present in an art world that isn't just made up of white guys.
So Gina, just giving you a time check.
Are we done?
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Somebody, I wanted to get to those questions and answer, and then if you have another one. Okay, so. Here we go. The artist interviews. Those are the artists I've interviewed. Oops. And these are the questions I asked. Yeah, and I asked them all in order. Yeah, you can take a pic of them. I won't read them out because we're at the end of time.
Can I ask a question? Are you, is it okay?
Yeah.
Can you just, 1 minute, just tell us about the work on the wall here?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So these are we good with this?
Yeah.
By the way, I conclude the structure calls for with difficulties, and I think, with difficulties that I faced in what methods, and I talked a little bit about, oops, I did them too early, I should have had fewer questions and things like that. And then I just have a couple of paragraphs written for the evaluation methods that I used. And the time is up, and thank you for your time and attention.